can be online paper, right?
Yeah. You're not graphing any.
You want us to write this down?
Yeah, you're writing this down. Yeah, this is like our problems that you're going to see in the. Okay, so it says find the slope of the line passing through the points. A is 4, -9. And B is -3, -6. Okay, so in the formulas that you wrote yesterday to find slope, okay, it's to subtract, because it's rise over run, right? Rise is your y's, okay? So y's are on top, x's are on the bottom. Okay, most of the time, if you were to look this up online or in a book, okay, usually they'll have it written like this. Okay, I'm going to add it just on this problem. We won't write it any further, but just so you, when you see it in the future, you're like, why is there 1s and 2s then? Okay. Okay, so in your sentence, we have x's and y's. So I have x and a y and x and a y. This was the first x and the first y they gave me. This was the second x and the second y they gave me. Okay, and that's all that those little subscripts is what they call them, what those stand for. Okay. So in this first one, we're going to show that the order does not matter, but you have to come from the same parentheses when you do it, okay? Because otherwise it would change the slope of things, okay? So I'm going to start with the second y. So the second y is a -6. Minus is part of the equation. It does not replace a negative that's attached to the number, okay? And then my first y is also a negative, okay? So now I'm going to go to my second x. So my second x was a -3. Minus is part of the equation. And then my first x is a 4. Okay, so now we just simplify it. Double negative is going to change it to a positive. And then this is going to be a -7. Okay, now we're just going to show that the order doesn't matter. So instead of starting with the second y, I'm going to start with the first y. And I always do it this way just because that's the way you read. I'm going to do the first one that I come across. So my first y is a -9, and I'm subtracting my other y, which is a -6. So whatever one you start with, whatever parentheses that came from, your x needs to match up. So if I started with this one, then below I need to start with 4. Okay, so 4 minus a -3. Okay, do my double negatives. So this would give me a -3 over a +7. Okay, are these slopes the same? Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as one of them is negative, it doesn't matter if it's at the top or if it's at the bottom. Okay, these are going to be equivalent. So you can choose if you want to stick with going to the second one first, subtracting the first one, you can do that. It does not matter. Okay, as long as you stay with the same parentheses then for your x. Okay, trying it one more time, but we're not going to do it twice. We're just going to do it once. So 26. Give the slope of a line that contains 3, -5, and -5, -5. So I'm going to do it the way that I always do it. I just start with my parentheses. So I'm going to go -5 minus my other y, which is a -5. Okay, I started with this parentheses, so I'm going to make sure that my x matches up. So 3 minus a -5. Okay, rid of my double negatives. So on top, I'm going to have what? 0, and then over 8. Okay, so something you've learned previous to this class, there's a difference between having a 0 on top and 0 under the line. Those are two totally different things. We do not write it like this, okay? This is actually when they ask you what your slope is, and you have your multiple choice, you're actually going to have 0. Okay? So if it's 0 over some number, your slope is going to be 0. If that's flipped and you have some number, whatever that number may be, 12, 10, it doesn't matter, but then you have 0 under the line, it's what? Undefined.
Or straight up. You just like going like this, like.
Okay, so this means that we have x's, right? So there is no rise, there's only runs. So that's what type of line? Horizontal. Okay, so we're just gonna abbreviate. Horizontal is when it's 0, and then opposite, okay, there's no run, there would only be a rise, so this one's going to be vertical line. Okay, and we're gonna actually be writing equations, okay, that you're gonna catch yourself on, like, should it be x equals or y equals? So don't write 0 over 8 or 8 over 0. It's either 0 or undefined. Okay, so when there's a 0, there's 2 ways to write it. That one or that one, depending on where the 0 is. Okay, done with slope. Kind of. Moving on to writing equations when we've got slope. So 31, no, it's too small. Try to make this bigger without making it blurry. Okay, says what is the standard form of the equation of a line with a slope of 4 passing through the points 2, 5? Okay, so they're going to go back and forth between slope, intercept, and standard. Okay, so you just need to know which one is which format, and that you wrote that as part of your vocab to remind you if you forgot. So what is the standard form of the equation of a line with a slope of 4 passing through the points 2, 5? Okay, so the key thing we want to watch for is which format do they want us in. So standard form. So standard form, if you look back at your vocab, is the ax plus by equals c. Okay, then in the sentence, we look at what type of information did they give me slope. That's always the first thing that you need to know. Okay, what they gave me slope. So I don't have to find the slope. Okay, because there's going to be some that we're going to actually have to find slope before we can start. Okay, and then they gave me a set of points. So in your formulas that you wrote at the beginning, you had one that's called point slope, because it gave you points and a slope. And so point slope formula looks like this. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And in the vocab, I had an arrow pointing to that one, and that one, because those are the 3 things they gave us for us to plug in. What does m stand for? Slope. Okay, so y minus y1. Well, the first y and the only y that they gave me was 5. Okay, so I'm going to go y minus 5. And you just said was slope. So slope is 4. And then x minus x1. Well, the only x that they gave me was 2. Okay, so from this format, you could either go to standard or you can go to slope, like getting the y by itself. Okay, so we just need to distribute the 4x over. So we have y minus 5 equals 4x minus 8. If they wanted slope intercept, then I just need to get the y by itself, right? Moving 5 over, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted standard. And standard has the x and the y together on one side and then the whole number on the other side, okay? So when I move this to the other side, it's going to change it from a positive to a negative. Okay, the y is already on the left side of the equation like it's supposed to be, so it's just going to stay the same as plus y. Okay, but now I got to move this 5 over to the other side, so it'll change from a negative to a positive, which would be a negative 3. Okay, for some reason, it's not wrong. Okay, that the answer is not wrong, it's right. When they have their answers, they always write the standard starting with a positive. So this is not wrong, and you on the multiple choice, so go back and forth, so you just need to recognize, like I have all the numbers right, but I can't find another multiple choice because they switched, okay? So this, or, so I want to add this, flipping all the signs, okay? So this is a 4x, that would change to a negative y, and this would change to a positive. Okay, this one and this one, if we were to graph it and get the y by itself and graph it, it would be the same line. Okay, so just recognize it when you go to do it and you got that first one and you're like, oh, it's not one of my choices. Look to see if they have the exact same thing, but all of the signs have to switch, not just one of them, all of them. And you'll see where that comes in more so when we have fractions that we're distributing for the slope. Okay, like this one. Well, the way it was on the paper, I want to do a whole number before we do a fraction. Okay, so write the standard form of the equation of a line with a slope of a negative 3/7 passing through the point 3, negative 8. Okay, so again, they want standard form, so we know it needs to be the x and the y together. Okay, they gave us slopes, so we're going to use a point slope formula. So we're going to go y minus y1, which would be what?
Negative 8.
Negative 8. Okay, what's the next thing I write?
The slope.
The slope, which is a negative 3/7. And then x minus 3. Okay, now, the catch here, and you'll have to, I know IMAC teaches this. I don't teach Algebra 1, so I don't know who you had before that. But the catch here is on standard form, you cannot, and I wrote this on your vocab, you cannot have fractions in standard form. You can in slope intercept because slope is rise over run, right? The standard doesn't have an m in the equation, so you can't have fractions. So to get rid of it right at the beginning versus at the end, is you take the top number and you distribute it to the right. This is like a shortcut, okay? And then you take the bottom number and you just distribute it to the left. Otherwise, you distribute this and get a negative 3/7 x, and then a positive 9/7, and then have to multiply the whole equation by a fraction, and we don't want to have to do that. Okay, so we're just going to get rid of it right off the bat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and change my double negative. Okay, so 7 times y would be 7y. And then 7 times 8 would give me, okay. So now I'm distributing the negative 3 to the right side. So negative 3 times x would be a negative 3x, and then a negative times a negative would give me a positive 9. Okay, standard equation. Okay, I want to move this over to the other side, so it'll change it from a negative to a positive. I don't have to move the 7y, it's already on the left side that it's supposed to be on, so it still stays as a positive 7y. Okay, my last step is for what? Right. Negative 56 over, so it'll be a negative 47. Okay, so remember I said standard, they don't like it to start with a negative, okay? If I would have put my negative down here with the 7 instead of the 3, it would have put that negative over to this side, okay? Which still would have given us the same answer. So again, if you had a negative 3x minus 7y plus 47, it would be the same equation. Instead of going up 3 and then to the left 7, I went down 3 and to the right 7, which would still be the same line, okay, when we go to graph our slope. Okay. All right.
moving, oh, well, no, I lied, one more. And then we're moving away from that.
We're going back down.
Okay, number 21. I'm just trying to make sure I've done a sample of all of them before we move on. Write the standard form of the equation of the line with a slope 0 passing through points 3, 5. And most of the time when you have a problem like this where there's 0, they usually just say write the equation, and they don't say standard or slope because generally there's something that's missing because you have 0 that's involved. Either the x or the y is going to be missing. So I'm not sure if this was a mistake or they were just trying to throw you off. Okay, so standard form, I'm going to say we don't need to pay attention to that, and we'll see why in just a minute. Okay, so I'm going to go y minus y1, which would be 5, equals slope, which is 0, and then x minus x1, which is 3. When you multiply anything times 0, regardless if I distribute it twice, it's going to be what?
0.
0. So really that whole side's just gone. Like the x is not there because you don't have 0x. It's like there is no x's. Okay? So, to solve this equation, the only thing I can do is get this variable by itself. Okay? So we would move this to the other side, and this is your equation. So if you were to graph it, we need to know, like, is the y by itself? What is it? So if you graph that one, it would be what type of line? Horizontal. Y is right here, but it has to go through 5. Okay, so remember when we wrote this, okay, if we have 0 as a slope, it wasn't undefined, okay, it was 0 as a slope when we went back here, okay, 0 as a slope is going to be a horizontal line that would go through at a positive 5. Okay. So again, I'm not sure why they wrote standard. Okay, moving on. This is actually a different objective. So number 35. Okay, this adds to our steps. So write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form that contains the points 9, 2, and 1, negative 5. Okay, so we have slope-intercept form, which is the one not standard. It's the one that has the y by itself. Okay, point slope formula. We have points, do we know slope in that sentence? No. Okay, so our very first step is to find slope. Now, all of this should be, I reviewed it with you last year because it's geometry. Okay, so again, remember when you do slope, it doesn't matter which one of the y's that you start with. Okay, so it doesn't, whatever one you're choosing. So I'm going to go 2 minus a negative 5. Okay, I started with this parentheses, my choice. You can start with the other one if you want to. Okay, so I'm going to go 9 minus 1. So change those, so that would be 7 over 8. Good there? Okay, now we have point slope. So now we can go to our step that we've been doing on the other ones. So y minus y1. What was my first y? What? 2. Okay, then slope. Now I've got. And then x minus x1. So the first x that they gave me was 9. Okay, we've done one like this. And we're going to take the 7 and it goes to the right side. And then we're going to take the 8 and it's going to go to the left side just to save us time in the end, okay, to not have to work with fractions. Okay, so that times that's going to give me 7x minus
minus 16. Could have kept the fraction this one. I forgot this is slope. Okay, add this 16 over here, which we're not going to add. We would subtract. Which gives us negative 47. Okay, last step is y by itself. Divide by 8. Divide by 8. Divide by 8. Okay, so this one, a little bit more difficult if we had to graph it because it wasn't a whole number where it crosses the y-axis, so we'd have to find the approximate 47 divided by 8. So y equals 7x, so it's 7/8 x minus 47 over 8. So that one, my error. We could have distributed the 7/8 and left it with fraction and distributed it, okay, because you would have 9 times 7 divided by 8, but then you'd have to work with the -2, and the -2 is not a fraction, so you'd have to change that to a fraction. So if you can do that, do it that way. I prefer this way, it's not to work with fractions at all. Okay, 36. Okay, this one I want you to try on your own. I did slope intercept. You were doing standard to see if you've got this. I'll do it on the board after you get started so you can look up, but I want you to get started. Actually, give me time to do it too. Okay, how'd we do? Good? If not, hopefully you caught your mistakes. Okay, so the route that I went, moving the 3x over, it would have given me a negative, positive, and then positive. So again, just remember, it's just on the standard ones that's like that. More than likely, they're probably going to have it written with the positive, okay, but just make sure you recognize that it can be just as long as all the signs are switched to the opposite. So it could be a positive 3x minus 5y equals a negative 29. Good? Okay. Yes.
Just go actually read the line.
Okay, 39, give the equation of the line that contains 5 -8 and 7 -8. Okay, I only want you to write this and then find slope and then stop. If you want your 5 points.
part of like getting easy points for your lesson quiz. It's up to you. Somebody will enjoy grading your paper. I'm okay if you abbreviate like on things as long as you know. Okay, so notice this one, unlike the last one that we did like this, they actually said write it in standard form, and I said I don't know why they wrote it that way, because usually there's something missing. Okay, so this is kind of a hint that you're going to have a zero someplace. Okay, so when you solve this, where was the zero at? On the top or the bottom? On the top. So as soon as you find a zero, like stop. You don't need to do the y minus y1 equals x, because all you need to do is look to see where the number is the same. So if you look in your parentheses, where is the number the same?
The y.
The y's, and the y is what in both of them?
Negative.
That is your equation. Because you had 0 on top, which means you had a 0 either on top or the bottom when you go to find slope. You don't have to do the y minus y1, because that will only just lead you right back to that. So 0 on top or 0 on bottom, look to see if they're the same. So if they had it flipped around, like the negative 8 was here for each of those parentheses, then you would have wrote x. That meant there was a 0 on the bottom. Okay. Okay, now to the fun stuff and finishing up. Parallel and perpendicular lines. And then we're done, please. I think. So find the pair of parallel lines. So on this, you would just, when you solve it, you're going to tell me is it line 1, line 2, or line 3. That's what we're looking at. Okay, so in your vocab, parallel lines were the same. They have to be exactly the same. So the same when we're parallel is talking about slopes. Okay, so that's the only part we're looking at is where the x is at. Are the numbers the same? When it's perpendicular, the other thing that you wrote is you take those two slopes, because they'll ask you to name the pair of perpendicular lines also. Then when you multiply them, they have to equal a -1, and that was in your vocab. Okay, and basically they're opposites. So like if you had 2, then the other one would have to be a negative, but you flip it. It'd be a -1/2. Okay, if you had a -3, then the next one has to be a positive, but you're going to flip it, and it would be 1/3. Okay. So that's your perpendicular. Okay, so first one, I just want to get the y by itself. It only matters what's in front of the x. That's the only part we're checking. So I don't need to really rewrite it, okay? I'm going to divide by a -4, divide by a -4. This, technically, I would divide by a -4, but we're only looking for slope, okay? So the slope on this one is 5/4, right? The same as the negative over a negative. We good so far? Okay, this one I need to get the y by itself. So if I moved the 5x over, right, you would change to a positive 5x. And again, I'm really not worried about the 1 because we're just looking for what's in front of the x. So to get the y by itself, I would divide by 4, divide by 4. So the slope on this one is also 5/4. Okay, and they kind of go hand in hand if there's here. We're already done, but just so you understand how to do that one. So if I move this over to the other side, it would change that -5x to a positive 5x, right? So then I'd have a -4y equals 5x. So when I divide by a -4, divide by a -4, this one would be a -5. Okay, so the two that are parallel would be 1 and 2. They're not asking what the slope is. They just want to know which set of lines have parallel lines. Very good. Okay. So determine whether a negative y equals x plus 9 and a negative 2x minus 2y equals 5 are perpendicular lines. And so you're just answering yes or no. Again, they don't want to know the slope.
Is it or isn't it? Okay, so again, this one, I only need to know what's in front of the x. So to get that y by itself, what is the slope for that first line? Negative what? 1, right? Because we just divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, well 1 over negative 1 is just a negative 1. So that's my first slope. Okay, so now this one, I remove the 2x over, right, which give me a positive 2x. And again, I'm not worried about the 5, I'm not rewriting the equation, I just need to know what's in front of the x. So I divide by a negative 2, divide by a negative 2, what is the slope for that?
Positive 1.
Negative 1. So, are these guys perpendicular? No, they're actually what? Parallel. So the answer is no. In order for them to be perpendicular, and I'm just making a different number, if the slope was 2, the other one would have to be a negative 1 over 2. You have to be flipped of each other. Or a negative 3, then it would have to be a positive 1 over 2. Because when I multiply these guys, it equals negative 1. Okay, those are parallel, so the answer was no. Yes. Yeah. Okay. There's this one and one other one. I'm doing this one. You're going to try the last one, and we're done. With what? I'm doing it. And then you're going to try it. Okay, write an equation in standard form that represents a line that passes through the points 5, negative 2, and is perpendicular to the graph of y equals 2x minus 2. Okay, so we're using point slope because they give us the points and they actually gave us the slope. So you just have to be able to read the equation and know if it's parallel, we want the same slope. If it's perpendicular, then you need to know what is it going to be. That's why I showed you on that previous screen how to flip it. Okay. So we want standard form. So in the end, I want to get it like this. Okay, I have my points. And I have my slope because they were nice enough to put it in y equals mx plus b. But I don't want parallel, because parallel would mean I would use 2. Okay? They want perpendicular. Okay, so perpendicular to 2 would be a negative what? I just did it on the previous page. 1 over 2. Okay, so this is the slope that I want to use. If it's parallel, you would use 2. Okay, so now I can do my y minus y1. And my slope, and then x minus x1, which would be 5. Okay, I'm going to change my double negatives. Okay, the top number goes to the right, bottom number goes to the left. So I have 2y plus 4 equals a negative x plus 5. And I have standards. Okay, so I would just move that x to the other side, which would make it a positive x plus 2y, and then what? Equals 1, because I can move the 4 over to the other side. And again, if they had negative, 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 for those, it would be the same thing. You good? Okay. You were trying this, but I gave you an easier one. Okay, so on the calendar, I had you to start the notes. Obviously, you were not going to be able to do that today. So tomorrow, we will start the notes. So it's just finishing on notes today. So there's no homework tonight. Unless Walker says one more word.
I know.
Oh! You guys have homework. if you don't.
I think I did standards one, but oh, yeah.
Yeah, they want slope intercept.
I like games better than practice.
Yeah, me too.
At the game, obviously.
What?
It's not lead game, it's